Today, Voices from Oxford is talking to Professor Peter Tufano. Professor Tufano is the new Dean of the Saïd Business School in the University of Oxford. He is also a Fellow of Balliol College, one of the oldest colleges in the University of Oxford, and he has recently moved to Oxford after a period of about 20 years, I think, at the University of Harvard. Now, Peter, the obvious question to begin with is, there's Harvard, one of the top universities in the world. There's Oxford, I hope also one of the top universities in the world. What on earth convinced you to move from Harvard to Oxford?
It's the opportunity.
Right.
I believe that the future of management education lies in the integration between what we do typically in business schools and what the rest of the university has to offer. So to kind of give a personal odyssey about how I came here, because it'll inform this
Please.
observation. When I was an undergraduate at Harvard, and I was there for 33 years, I studied economics, and then I did my undergraduate thesis in city planning. I came back to be in an architecture program and an MBA program. I ended up not doing the architecture stuff, but getting my MBA. Over the years, I have co-authored with people at schools of social work. I've taught at Harvard Law School. I work with people from the government school at Harvard, and folks from the economics department at Harvard. Before I left, I worked for the president of the university, and the strategy that I always thought was the most powerful one in management education is how it is that you create a really strong business school, deeply embedded
in the university
in
itself,
a university,
and presumably reaching out.
Correct. So
Yes.
if you look at management education, some of it's done by schools that are completely standalone. They have no real relationship with the university. Very fine schools like INSEAD or LBS. Then there's a class of business schools that are in universities, but still relatively insulated from the rest of the
Isolated,
from the rest of the university.
Sure.
I had been carrying around in my head a model of how one would create a fully integrated business school inside a university.
Right.
And while I received a number of opportunities to talk about dean's jobs over many, many years, this job at the University of Oxford was the one that piqued my curiosity and led me to come over here and start to kick the tires. And what I discovered was that the opportunities for integration here, the opportunities to build this new generation of business school, are better than anywhere else in the world.
Now, is that partly because of the collegiate nature of the university, that there's a sense in which the university, in addition to having the departments, is also woven in a different way, isn't it? And therefore the interdisciplinarity is, as it were, built into the institution. Each college is like, as it were, an institute of advanced studies to make a point.
So I think part of the reason is because of the strengths of Oxford. Paradoxically, part of the reason why this can succeed is because of the weaknesses of Oxford.
That's an interesting remark.
So the strengths of Oxford, I think you've hit upon the one strength that is critical to this strategy, which is that, at many schools, faculties don't interact, students don't interact, because they physically live in different places. They don't eat together, they don't do sports together. The faculties never have any reason to talk to one another. Certainly that was the case largely at Harvard. Whereas the collegiate system, as you've identified here, gives rise to that kind of natural interaction. I think that's a great starting point, and that's the strength part. There's also a weakness part. So how is it that Oxford is weak, or at least has certain constraints that one can leverage to make this strategy work? And I think there's a couple of different institutional constraints about Oxford that lead my vision of the strategy to maybe work better here than elsewhere. The first constraint is the fact that based on the fact that Oxford's tuitions are set by the government, historically it was very difficult to make money teaching undergraduates. While the undergraduate programs are at the core of this university, economically, for many reasons.
It actually doesn't work.
Well, for many reasons, the various departments in the university have created postgraduate programs and deep research programs, which are all largely unrelated to one another. More than 200 different taught master's programs, research institutes across the whole university, largely kind of not connected with one another.
Right.
That's a weakness, but I see this as a strength.
So what you would like to see then is the business school become one of the poles of interdisciplinarity, one of the ways in which you can bring, say, economics in relation to management, engineering in relation to management. There are moves of that kind, of course, already, aren't there?
Sure. So, I mean, the way I express this strategy is Oxford depth and Oxford breadth.
Okay.
So let me describe what I mean by those two terms. Oxford depth is all about how it is that we have deep understanding of a number of important phenomena around the university that we can bring to create a customized educational experience. And a specific example is this new program that we've just launched this past autumn, which is the Oxford 1+1 MBA program.
And 1+1 refers to...
Well, I'll explain how the structure works.
Right.
It's really quite simple. In business schools, typically there are 1-year programs and 2-year programs. Most European schools, including Oxford, have a 1-year program. Most of the top North American schools and some outside North America have a 2-year program. 2-year programs would cost at Wharton, for example, $178,000. And you go and you get 2 years of breadth, basically. So what we're allowing students to do is to simultaneously apply to 2 master's programs, an MBA and another program.
Right.
Where the other program is a program where they can get deep domain expertise through depth. For example, in the first year of this, there are 12 different programs that are included officially in this pilot. There are 4 programs in geography around the environment. So if you want to become an expert in the environment,
So
if you want to, there are 4 programs in education. There's computer science, there's social science of the internet from the Oxford Internet Institute. Ultimately, think about all 200 master's programs around the university, which is the place where you get depth. In your first year. In your second year, then you come into the MBA program.
So you could interdigitate, as it were, with almost any of the master's programs in the university.
So we are open to that kind of connection. And there's a third part, which is what's the plus? So what makes the plus in 1+1?
Plus.
And the plus is really 2 things. One is that we will be reaching out to these students in their first year when they're in the other program. To avail themselves of some of the opportunities here at Saïd. They'll have mentors, advisors, they'll be invited to our events, use our career services, and vice versa. In their second year when they're in the MBA, they will, their first year master's programs will reach a hand to them and keep in touch. The other important plus is their college. We've enlisted not only the support of a number of departments for this pilot, but we've enlisted the support of a number of colleges. We're quite eager to have students come and spend, master's students come and spend 2 years. As you know, what colleges are trying to do is to create these deep, lasting bonds with their students. And then it's much easier to do if a student is in residence for 2 years than for 1.
And for 1, exactly.
So the plus then becomes the 2 departments kind of reaching out between in their non-years, and then this continuous bedrock collegiate experience.
You're beginning to answer one of the questions that I really wanted to put to you, which is, okay, you're here responsible for the business school, and you've already explained that you are reaching out to the rest of the university with joint programs, interdisciplinarity being one of the key things. Looking in a more general way at the University of Oxford, what do you see its role as being in the future? Do you have views on the way the university as such, not just the business school, should be developing?
So I'm awfully new to Oxford to make pronouncements about what this university
That might
should
make
be
it
doing.
more interesting to know what you think at this stage.
But maybe I can make some comments about what universities and leading world universities can and should do.
That would be good.
So obviously we have to prepare young men and women for the futures that lie ahead, and train them in specific topics and how to think and how to become lifelong learners. And there's a whole litany of things that you will see that any university has to worry about.
Sure.
And what are the particular responsibilities of the world's leading universities? Because that, I think, describes the challenges that the heads of Oxford and Harvard and some other places might have to worry about. Because what I've just described in the first part, that's what every university has to worry about. But what do the world's leading universities have to look at? And what makes them special? Well, 800 years of history, maybe. A rich balance sheet for Harvard, maybe. The fact that they have an incredibly rich and diverse alumni population, for sure. The fact that they've been entrusted for centuries, 3.5 centuries or so for Harvard and 8 for Oxford, with, kind of in a very trusted place in society. And I think as a result of all that, and having some of the best thinkers in the world resident, is that I'd like to think that we're all here because we actually have an interest in some of the world's biggest problems. And we think that the application of our research and our teaching and our outreach, in particular in the business community, is a way that we can move forward on various topics and make some progress.
So Oxford should be interested in the environment and what's happened to it, should be interested in the financial crisis and what we do about it, should be interested in the politics of the day.
So we should be interested in timeless topics where, the world will need our help, as opposed to simply looking backwards and describing. I mean, that's not to say that history is unimportant. It really is very important, but that we need to be looking forward as well as backward. And I think you've listed some of the topics, but there are others too. For example, the demographic challenges of China, Japan, and the West all aging will lead to an important set of issues for businesses. It will, the aging of China and China and the West leads to challenges for retirement security, retirement income, challenges to healthcare systems, challenges to housing systems, and then even the design of goods and services will change, knowing that a large fraction of the population will be kind of over the age of 65 in various countries. Those are business challenges. What do we know about this demographic bulge that's working through the system? And what are the implications for business? At the same time, what are the implications for public policy? Knowing, for example, in the US where I came from, that if you look at the demographic pyramid, instead of going to a pyramid that looks like this, where you've got a lot of young people and a handful of old people, the pyramid is looking more like this, if not a little bit like this.
Because of the age structure.
Because of relatively low birth rates and relatively long lives of older people. Those are all good things. Both of those are very good things, but we have to, both on the public policy side and on the business side, acknowledge those large multi-year trends, and then put our minds to work to think about what should we do about them. And I think specifically in a business school, we should be thinking about what are the implications for designing better products for retirement and for healthcare and for housing and for other kind of goods and services.
And to return to the theme that we began with, this inevitably means interacting with other faculties within the university and of course with institutions outside the university. You can't deal with the environment without doing geography and studying deserts and all the rest of it. You can't deal with the healthcare problems you're referring to without interacting with the medical school. So this fits, doesn't it, with your strategy generally, that in order to deal with these problems, or rather to give a view on these problems, because after all in the end it would be others will have to manage the problems, you have inevitably to interact with other faculties.
That is the strategy. And so it would be naive to think that you could build the capabilities inside a business school about everything you might need to know about the environment and about demography and about political science and about large-scale computing and big data or any of the other topics, or scarcity. I actually feel somewhat badly for standalone business schools, because as they go to challenge some of these issues or to address some of these issues, they don't have the wealth of resources that we have here at Oxford, nor do other world-class universities have.
Well, all of that sounds very good to me. Obviously, I'm speaking partly as an Oxford person, and I very much like the interdisciplinary aspect of what you've described, and I hope our listeners will do so too. Can I then take you now to another aspect that we were discussing earlier on, which we started on, which was you said, and I certainly liked this very much, that a business school should be within the university, should be relating to the rest of the university. Are there ways in which Oxford can make that easier? I ask the question for the following reason, which I don't think will surprise you too much. When this school was set up, I don't know exactly now, is it 20 odd years ago that 15, the business school was set up? It won't surprise you to know that a reasonable fraction of the university wasn't too happy about a business school, of all things, being in Oxford. And I put that card on the table, as it were, just to give an indication of the unease that existed at that time. Mm-hmm. Now, my experience of many parts of the university is a lot of that unease has disappeared. But there's still a question. What exactly is the role of a university when it comes to questions like business training, business education, management, and so on? It is a discipline, after all, and you would presumably defend that and say this is as much an intellectual challenge as studying, let's say, Greek philosophy.
Sure, world law.
Yeah. Exactly, and perhaps the Greek philosophy is relevant to what you want to study. But the challenge I'm putting to you is the way in which a business school relates to the rest of the university clearly is going to benefit enormously from what you're describing, which is that of collaborating with the rest of the university on various courses, masters, and so on. But there is also a question about, as it were, what is the basic role of a university in the first place, and how do the different faculties fit in with that basic role?
Right. So again, if we go back to the conception of a university, that in part a world-class university should be thinking about and addressing some of the bigger problems in society. There's basic research and applied research. We're probably more on the applied research end of the spectrum, along with engineering, government, certainly the new Blavatnik School.
And many aspects of health, after all.
Health, chunks of MPLS. Many of us are on the applied end of the spectrum, which is to say that, how do we take the knowledge and learnings that we're gathering and apply them to solve specific problems, whether that's the improvement of the delivery of healthcare, or kind of writing better laws, or figuring out better ways to govern public administrations, figuring out better ways to run businesses. So there is, in any place, there will always be a continuum of research from the least applied, the purest, and the most applied. We're not at the extreme end of the most applied, but we're kind of on that end.
In that sort of end,
I think that's a healthy tension, in the same way that I think it's healthy in universities that there are pure scientists and then there are engineers. That strikes me as being extraordinarily healthy. And the unease that Oxford had 15 or 16 years ago with the founding of this business school is not unusual. I came from Harvard Business School, celebrated its anniversary of more than 100 years. Well, it's now more than 100 years old. While generally people are comfortable with Harvard Business School, one can find pockets in the university that might be just as happy not to have a business school. That's inevitable. But I think overall, is the university stronger because they have a strong business school? The answer is surely yes. Will this university be stronger if we can make ours a stronger business school? The answer is surely yes. Because, for example, let's go back to this issue of demography. There are some great demographers and people who study aging in Oxford. Wonderful people who I've met. Would it be useful if I can train a whole cadre of business students and alumni to be sensitive to those issues and think about the implications? I think we're all better off if our business leaders, young and old, are aware of all those issues. Can I be the conduit through which this learning comes from specialists in one part of the university to kind of my practicing managers or would-be practicing managers here at the business school.
Right.
Yes, I think it makes us both strong.
Can I perhaps also put to a point to you that has occurred to me as we were discussing actually? You referred to there being, as it were, pure aspects of research and applied aspects of research. Some of us would claim to do both at the same time
Most
because
of
we
us
can't
do.
help doing
Of
both at the
course.
same time, and I think you'd recognise that,
course.
wouldn't you?
Yeah.
I mean, the area I work in, which is medical science, it's impossible for me not to be thinking about the basic principles of biological science
Of course.
and pushing the boundaries on that, at the same time as interacting with pharmaceutical companies to try and develop better drugs and avoid toxicity.
Of course.
And I personally find that totally acceptable, that
So do I.
you, as it were, go to the two ends. And so, from my point of view, a university should indeed be about both, and it shouldn't be, as in any way, apologising for doing both.
I think we're on the exact same
But
page.
that's laying my cards on the
Yeah.
table, as it were.
And,
Yes.
but I think there are questions of balance. So at a business school,
Right.
we should, on balance, move more towards the applied.
Yes, I understand
On
that.
a business school,
Yes.
we should be focused more on business questions.
Yes.
Which sounds like an obvious and trite statement, but it's a statement that needs to be made from time to time. There is another conception of a business school, which tries to embed inside the business school a university,
Right.
as opposed to trying to embed a business school inside a university. So do you want a university inside a business school or a business school inside a university?
Right.
The latter, which is the strategy that certainly I hope to implement here, has an extraordinarily strong business school that looks to link with the rest of the university as opposed to recreate it
Right.
inside.